what's up? I'm Dave Boyer, aka Mr. Boyer, aka the Swamp Man. I'm in my house at Boyers Park, heading up to my newly designed video studio. So, heading upstairs, gonna walk across my daughter's bedroom, and then gotta head up a ladder because I've created this up above one of their closets. So, what we're going to talk about today is one of my favorite places in the world, Hawaii. Anybody that's been to Hawaii probably feels the same way. So let's go over those lesson objectives. First objective is going to review how volcanic mountains form. Once we kind of understand and remember how a typical volcanic mountain forms, we're going to compare Hawaii to that. And then finally, we're going to try to put this all together and understand how plate tectonics play a role in the formation of Hawaii. So, volcanic mountains, the classic way that a volcanic mountain forms is through subduction, when one plate is pushed underneath another plate because it's more dense than the other plate. Often that's an oceanic plate moving underneath a continental plate. That oceanic crust then starts to melt into liquid rock, build up some pressure down in the mantle, and then erupt out of the crust as lava, cool down and harden into rock and form bigger and bigger mounds of rock and ultimately our volcanic mountain. So typical volcanic mountains are going to happen, or they're going to form at plate boundaries. So how's that different from a beautiful place like Hawaii? Let's first take a look at the Pacific Plate. So I try to draw in a rough outline of the Pacific Plate, a huge plate on Earth. And on these plate boundaries, especially on this western side, we have a whole lot of subduction and a whole lot of volcanoes. This is called the Ring of Fire that circles around this. But Hawaii is not a part of that. Hawaii sits smack dab in basically the middle of the Pacific Plate. So something's got to be different about Hawaii than, say, Vanuatu or the islands of Japan. Some of these islands that have been formed from subduction along the Ring of Fire on the edge of the Pacific Plate. So let's try to figure out how Hawaii is different. And then we'll talk about how the plate movement, which I just showed on that as well, how the movement of the Pacific Plate affects the formation of the islands that made Hawaii. I've been pretty lucky. I've been to Hawaii twice. I went once in 2011 with my family, my parents and my brother and sister, and we spent our time on the island of Maui, about a week there. And then a few years later was able to go back with my now wife on our honeymoon. We spent 2 weeks in Hawaii. One of those weeks we spent on the island of Hawaii, which the locals call the Big Island, and then or people call it the Big Island, locals don't necessarily. And then we spent a week on Kawaii. So there's 4 main islands of Hawaii and then bunches of other smaller islands. But of the 4 main islands, I've got some experience on 3 of them, and I'll try to share some of that. My intention is to take this video that I'm shooting now and put it into a wee video and add a bunch of pictures along with this, and I'll probably cut and break up the video along with that. We'll see if that works out. Some of my technology stuff is struggling a little bit during this work at home time from coronavirus. I don't have internet access in my home, so everything I'm trying to upload, I'm using my mobile data, and takes longer, and it's eating up data. So we'll see how that works out. But for now, I'm just going to move forward and making some of these videos. All right, to understand how these islands of Hawaii formed, we have to look underneath the crust, underneath where the islands are right now. So my little setup I've got, tried to represent that. So it always comes back to the heat from the core. The heating from the core is one of the essential things that makes life possible here on Earth. But it's also the thing that's basically driving all the layers up above them. So underneath where Hawaii sits right now is an unusually hot spot. There's several of these around the planet that are not found at plate boundaries. So these are not the kinds of hotspots that are driving convection currents and moving plates around. This is just a single hotspot where magma is being heated up from the core and rising with a lot of pressure up towards the surface, up towards the crust. Some other common examples, some really cool places on the Earth that I would love to travel to. A very similar island chain as Hawaii has been forming off the coast of South America, an island group called the Galapagos Islands. Same exact story is going on there. We could take this video and just change the names of these islands and then we get the same story. There's also one of these geologic hotspots sitting underneath the middle of the United States, underneath Yellowstone National Park, basically. A lot of people talk about that being a super volcano that could erupt and drastically change life here on Earth at some point. But the hotspot we're going to feature on is the one in the center of the Pacific Ocean. So, as we've got this magma rising up from the bottom of the mantle, rising up with a lot of pressure towards the top of the mantle, it often, in many other hotspots not like this one, once it reaches the top, it's cooled down enough and it spreads out to relieve some of that pressure. But this hotspot underneath Hawaii is exceptionally hot, and it's rising that magma with an incredible force and pushing on the bottom of the crust. And it has broken through the crust there, and that allows some of that magma to rise up as lava and spill out onto the top of Earth's crust. So we're going to kind of tell this as a story of millions of years worth of time. And we're going to start 4 million years ago. So 4 million years ago, enough lava came up, enough magma came up and spilled onto the surface as lava and started to pile up on the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. And about 4 million years ago, enough new rock had come up from the mantle to form the first island of the islands of Hawaii today. If we look on Google Maps, actually, and Google Earth, you can see kind of the contours of the ocean underneath it, and you can trace this back way further back than 4 million years ago to many, many islands that aren't islands today that came from this same hotspot. But we'll maybe look at that when I edit it and we video. But Kawaii formed 4 million years ago. When my wife and I were on our honeymoon, one of the last actually activity we did before boarding our plane to go back home was to take a helicopter flight over the island of Kauai, sorry. And during that helicopter flight, you could still see some of the remnants of the crater that formed Hawaii, the volcano that made Kauai. I keep getting Hawaii and Kauai mixed up. There's a lot of weird words in the Hawaiian language. They've only got 13 letters in their alphabet, so you see a whole lot of the same letters repeating. But in general, Kauai, you don't see evidence of volcanoes there. We've got really steep mountain slopes, especially on the northwest corner of it, the place called the Napali Coast. You'll see some pictures of that, I'm sure. Really gorgeous place. So Kauai is extinct volcanoes that haven't erupted in many, many years and are not expecting to erupt again. So what happened between 4 million years ago and, a later time period? Well, that's where that Pacific Plate movement comes in. So this whole plate, this whole top of my workspace right here is moving off to the northwest. So after Kauai formed here above this hotspot, it started to slide with the Pacific Plate towards the northwest. And once it moved off of that hotspot, it no longer was erupting with new lava, so it stopped adding more rock to the island. And since then, the island's been going through some of the natural changes that all places go through. They're having erosion, wind, water, breaking down rocks, weathering rocks, and washing them down shore. So the island is actually shrinking, as all islands are. Plant life has come in and become very mature there over these 4 million years. But the hotspot was still remaining active, even today, still remains active. So in some time in the future of that, About 600,000 years after Kawaii first broke through the ocean, the Pacific Ocean surface, enough rock had built up and piled up in this area again to form a new island, the island of Oahu. Oahu is the one of the main island that I have not been to. Most people that have been to Hawaii probably have been to Oahu, and I've actually been in the airport in Honolulu, but we didn't leave the airport, so I don't really consider like I've seen the island. But you know, Honolulu, the capital of Hawaii, is there. The naval base Pearl Harbor, where the attack leading up to our engagement in World War II occurred there. But there is some more evidence in Oahu of past volcanic activity. I didn't draw in great pictures here, but this little piece sticking off right here, this little peninsula, this whole southeast corner of Oahu is featured around a extinct volcanic crater called Diamond Head Crater. It's made it into a state park. It's one of the things I would really love to see if I went to Oahu. You can climb up to the top of the rim of the volcano, climb down into the caldera, the cone of the volcano too. It's pretty cool. And inside that cone, we've got a lot of plant life that's already come through there because the volcano hasn't erupted in a long time. The reason it hasn't erupted is because the Pacific Plate is moving constantly. Only about 10 centimeters every year, which is still a lot, but it's moving slowly away from that hotspot. These islands are. So between 4 million years ago and 3.4 million years ago, Kauai slid a little bit further away. Once Oahu came up and broke through the surface, the Pacific Plate began to take it further away. So these islands are moving with the plate, but our hotspot is not changing. The hotspot is continuing to bring new magma, new lava up to the surface of the crust. So now we fast forward in time. We're going to fast forward in time 1.3 million years ago. Magma began to build up on the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, and enough of it spills up on top of the crust, so on top of the surface of the Pacific Ocean, so that we get an island. And we got the island of Maui. Some of the key features in the island of Maui, sorry, I'm zooming in and out here. It's kind of broken into the west side of Maui and the east side of Maui. The west side of Maui features an old volcano that is extinct in the center of that spot, because that was above the hot spot. And as it slid away, the Haleakala National Park, a really cool place that I got to watch a gorgeous sunrise from, is a volcano in the middle of the eastern side of the island. And Haleakala is the volcano that formed the main part of the Maui island. So the story continues to be very familiar. The Pacific Plate is moving the crust towards the northwest. So over time, our islands continue to move. And as they move off the hot spot, they're no longer erupting with new lava, and the forces of weathering, erosion, and plant succession are changing those islands. Maui is an island that you can see lots of evidence of volcanoes. It has erupted even just recently. Within the last several hundred years, we've had eruptions on Maui because it's still pretty close to this hot spot. And in reality, actually, this hot spot is not one single plume of magma coming up. It's multiple columns of it. So the further an island gets away from the main area of the hot spot, that's when those volcanoes can become extinct. But in the meantime, there's lots of volcanic activity still in the area of the Hawaiian Islands. So we've got our Kauai, our Oahu, our Maui, and we've got one more of the main islands. So about 700,000 years ago, enough lava spilled up on top of the crust underneath the ocean to then grow land, grow rock above the Pacific Ocean and form the last of the four main islands, the island of Hawaii, which some call the Big Island. And Hawaii arose about 700,000 years ago above the Pacific Ocean. I might be wrong on this number, but I think I remember that Hawaii is made up of five volcanoes currently. A couple of them are not active and a couple of them are active. The three main ones that I'm familiar with are Mauna Kea, which is up towards the northern side of the island, though I think there's another volcano at the very northern tip. But Mauna Kea, which also happens to be the largest mountain in the entire world, bigger than Mount Everest, not higher above sea level than Mount Everest, but because Hawaii, most of the island of Hawaii is underneath the Pacific Ocean, from the base of the mountain to the top of the mountain, it's bigger than Mount Everest, and yet Mount Everest does reach a little bit higher, not much higher, but twice as high as Mauna Kea. Then there's one of the biggest mountains in the world, Mauna Loa, which is more in the center of the Hawaiian island. And then we have Kilauea. Kilauea is a place that my wife and I spent about half of our week in that area around Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. We're able to see the billowing smoke coming up from the crater, the Hanuamu crater in Hawaii National Parks. We also went down towards the coast and saw where that lava is spilling off into the ocean. Took a lava ocean boat tour. Really, really cool things, being able to see all this active volcano stuff. So that Kilauea is sitting right above one of these little plumes of magma coming up from this hotspot. And it formed the Big Island. The Big Island is named that because it's much bigger than the others. And it's just as gorgeous, I think. A very different looking island than many of the islands of Hawaii. So that's where we would stop if the world ended today, but the world's not going to end today. So we've got a continuing story. Go on to Google Earth, Google Maps, and switch to the Earth feature of that, and find Hawaii, and then start looking to the northwest of Hawaii. And you're going to see, first of all, starting with the Big Island, you'll see them in their typical chain of Hawaii, Maui, Oahu, Kauai. But then look further on, and you're going to see that there's plenty of spots of the ocean that are risen up, but they're no longer above the surface of the ocean. So they're no longer considered islands, but there's lots of these areas going back millions and millions of years of former islands that formed above this same hotspot. It's been really active for a really long period of time, and it's going to continue being active for a period of time into the future. So people that study this kind of stuff are really excited about what's happening off the coast of the Big Island, about 25 miles southeast of the Kilauea volcano. Just off the coast of the Big Island, there is a spot that they're watching. And that spot has already been named Loihi. As the magma has been coming up and spilling over into the bottom of the Pacific Ocean right off the coast of the Big Island, that magma is bringing new rock up, and it's piling higher and higher and higher. Some estimates depends on the rate of adding rocks, but some estimates range from 10,000 to 100,000 years from now. Loihi is going to build up high enough that it breaks through the top of the Pacific Ocean. And once we have that, we have a new island of Hawaii, if Hawaii is around as a state, around then. So it's really cool for geologists to be able to send submersible submarines down there and take video and watch Loihi. They've been able to map it out with our advanced technologies that we have now. We're able to see a new island of Hawaii being made in real time. It's just a slow process, and it's going to take a long time. But it's really awesome to think of, maybe a human 100,000 years from now living on the island of Loihi and thinking back to kind of their ancestors that were on Hawaii or Maui or Oahu or Kawaii. Really cool ideas here. Like I said, I'm going to try to edit this into a wee video. I've got tons of pictures that I took, tons of pictures that are online. I really want to inspire you to go to Hawaii and really be able to see kind of geology, see this movement of the plates and the hotspot and volcanism, all in action in a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful place. So I'll stop my video there. We've kind of gone over our 3 main lesson objectives, finishing off with the idea that the Pacific Plate moving to the northwest is why we have different islands of Hawaii that have formed over time, and why there will be more islands of Hawaii that form between now and the future. Glad I got to stop and share a little bit with you and tell you that science rocks.